Her mother-in-law pushed her out pregnant, into a raging storm to die. But that unborn child didn't just survive, he returned as a king. What happened next left the entire village speechless. You won't believe how karma turned the story around. In the lush, sun-kissed valleys of Zumbala, where tall palms danced in the wind and red clay homes lined the winding paths, stood the grand estate of the Btorii family. Everyone in Zumbala knew the name. The Btoris were not just rich, they were powerful. They controlled trade routes, owned vast lands, and sat in the highest council seats. Men feared them, women admired them, and no celebration in Zumbala was complete without their presence. Their compound, walled with carved stone and guarded day and night, was a symbol of greatness. But within those walls lived a woman colder than the mountain winds, Wanuka. Wanuka was the silent force behind the Btorii name. Her face rarely showed emotion, but her presence alone could silence a room. She had lost her husband early and raised her only son, Jabari, with fierce protection. Jabari was tall, handsome, and groomed to take over the Btorii legacy. Wanuka poured all her love, ambition, and control into him. He was her everything, and she was not willing to share him with anyone, not even his future wife. Wanuka believed no woman would ever be worthy of her son. To her, Zumbala's girls were either too poor, too weak, or too cunning. She dismissed all of them with a glare. Anyone who tried to get close to Jabari mysteriously disappeared from his life. Friends avoided setting him up with their sisters, afraid of Wanuka's wrath. She was quiet, but her influence was loud. While the village praised Jabari's charm and leadership, they whispered about his mother's shadow. Wanuka had a past no one dared to speak of, rumors of betrayal, control, and even dark sacrifices. Some said she had cursed other women who once tried to enter her family. Others claimed she visited the old caves at night, speaking to the spirits of her ancestors. True or not, one thing was clear: Wanuka was feared. Inside the Btorii house, Wanuka controlled everything: who cooked, who cleaned, who entered, and who left. Servants walked on eggshells. Her orders were followed without question. Even Jabari, confident as he seemed in public, bowed to his mother's word behind closed doors. He loved her, but he feared her too. He often said, "No one understands sacrifice like my mother," and left it at that. So when Jabari came home one day with a soft smile and the scent of firewood and jasmine on his clothes, Wanuka knew something had changed. He had met someone. Her heart turned cold. Her son, her life, was slipping away. A storm brewed in her eyes, but she said nothing yet. She watched. She listened. She waited. Because if any woman thought she could enter the Btorii house without Wanuka's blessing, she was deeply mistaken. And Wanuka, she was ready to fight with every cruel weapon in her soul to keep her son exactly where he belonged, by her side, under her control, and far away from love. Ayo was unlike anyone Jabari had ever known. She came from the stonemason's quarter, a humble part of Zumbala, where hands were rough and clothes were plain. But there was something about her, something gentle, yet strong. She moved quietly, spoke softly, and carried herself with a grace that couldn't be taught. At the annual fire drum festival, as flames danced in the sky and drums thundered across the valley, Jabari saw her weaving flower garlands for the children. Her smile lit up the night. In that moment, he forgot every name, every rule, every warning. He saw only her. Their eyes met once, and it was enough. The prince of Btorii and the daughter of a mason. Whispers followed. People talked, but Jabari didn't listen. He found reasons to walk past her home, to linger at the market, to speak to her. Ayo, shy at first, tried to keep her distance. She knew the power the Btorii name carried. She had heard of Wanuka, but love doesn't ask permission. It grows where it pleases. And soon, Ayo's heart softened for Jabari. They married quietly, under the orange sky, with only a few witnesses. Jabari wanted a grand wedding, but Ayo begged for something small. She didn't want to be a display. She just wanted love, and Jabari gave it freely. He stood beside her, proud and unshaken, even as his mother refused to attend. Wanuka didn't hide her fury. Her words were sharp. "She is not one of us. She does not carry the blood of kings." But Jabari stood firm. He told her, "I choose her, not for her blood, but for her heart." Those words cracked something in Wanuka. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just grew colder. Ayo entered the Btorii home not as a daughter-in-law, but as an intruder. Wanuka's silence was louder than any insult. She never spoke to Io, never looked her in the eye. She passed orders through servants, made backhanded comments about strangers in royal homes, and ensured Io always felt like a guest, never family. But Io remained calm. She was kind to the staff, greeted Wanuka each morning with a respectful bow, and made Jabari's favorite meals. She smiled through the cold, through the silence, through the rejection. She loved Jabari deeply and believed that time would melt his mother's heart. However, Wanuka had no plans to soften. To her, Io's smile was a threat, her quiet strength an insult. She waited patiently, watching for cracks, and when Io's belly began to swell with life, Wanuka didn't rejoice. Instead, her bitterness deepened. She didn't see a grandchild. She saw a stain on her bloodline, a child born from love, not power. To Wanuka, that was unforgivable. Io, glowing with hope, still believed the child might bring peace. But behind closed doors, Wanuka was planning. She had lost her son to love once. She would not lose the Btorii name to a stonemason's child. The storm had only begun. From the moment Io stepped into the Btorii compound, Wanuka made it clear she was not welcome. What began as silence quickly turned into torment. Wanuka didn't raise her voice. She raised her cruelty. Io's clothes, carefully hand-stitched with love, began to vanish. Then came the burns, her only warm shawl thrown into the fire while she was cooking, her shoes cut and hidden, her jewelry stolen. Wanuka would stare her in the eye and say nothing, as if daring her to speak. At dinner, Io would find her meals different from everyone else's. One evening, after just 2 bites, her stomach twisted in pain. She curled on the cold floor while Wanuka watched calmly from her chair, sipping water, pretending not to notice. The healer said it was food poisoning, but no one dared accuse Wanuka. Even Jabari, who was away most days handling trade, never saw it. Io stayed silent, refusing to burden him. She believed if she just endured a little longer, things would change. Then came the night Wanuka locked her out. Rain poured over Zundari, and lightning cracked the sky. Io returned from visiting her old mother, only to find the gate bolted from inside. She knocked, called out, waited, but no one came. She sat under the porch roof, holding her belly, shivering. Her baby kicked softly as if trying to comfort her. The next morning, the doors opened as if nothing happened. Wanuka stepped out, looked her up and down, and walked past, without a word. Io cried at night, muffling her sobs into her pillow. She didn't complain. She swept the compound, cooked meals, cleaned the storerooms, and served Wanuka tea with steady hands. Her face remained calm, even when Wanuka poured hot porridge beside her feet, by accident. The servants pitied her, but said nothing. Wanuka's power scared them all. "She's too soft," Wanuka would sneer to the cook. "One push, and she'll break." But Io didn't break. She bent, she bowed, but she never gave up. There was a fire inside her, a quiet strength. She endured each insult, each injury, with a heart full of silent prayers. She rubbed her belly gently each night, whispering to her child, promising a better life. Wanuka's cruelty only made her stronger. Io wasn't weak. She was patient. She didn't fight Wanuka's hate with anger. She fought it with endurance. And while Wanuka laughed, thinking she was winning, she didn't know something powerful was growing inside Io. Not just a child, but a spirit of unshakable will. Wanuka saw only a girl she thought could be broken. But Io was a woman with roots deep in the earth, and even storms couldn't uproot her. The battle between them wasn't loud. It was silent. But every day Io stood, smiled, and served. She was winning in a way Wanuka couldn't understand. And soon, that strength would change everything. When Io found out she was pregnant, she clutched her stomach with trembling hands, her eyes filling with tears, not of fear, but of joy. It was the first light she had felt in a long time. She waited for Jabari to return, and when he did, she whispered the news with a shy smile. Jabari's joy exploded like the morning sun. He lifted her in his arms and shouted, "We are going to have a child!" He ran out into the square of Zundari, tossing coins to street drummers and buying food for children. "A Btorii heir is coming," he declared. The people clapped. The servants smiled. But behind a curtain, Wanuka watched, and her heart boiled. The moment the door closed behind Jabari, she stormed into the kitchen and shattered every clay pot in sight. "She wants to trap him," she shouted. "That witch from the stone quarter dares to birth a Btorii." Her voice echoed through the house like thunder. Servants froze. The cook fled. Wanuka stood in the mess, breathing heavy, her face twisted with hate. Jabari, unaware of the storm brewing behind him, tried to reason with her the next day. "Mother, she's carrying your grandchild. She's carrying disgrace," Wanuka spat. "This is a trick. She wants to climb with that child in her belly. But I see her game." From that moment, Wanuka made sure Io was no longer treated like a wife. She removed Io from the family table and sent her to eat in the servants' quarters. Io, now with a growing belly, sat alone on a cracked stool while the others whispered around her. Meals became smaller, sometimes cold, sometimes missing entirely. "She is not fit to birth a Btorii," Wanuka would say loudly, ensuring the whole household heard. "That child will carry shame." Even the midwife, who once greeted Io kindly, became distant. Wanuka's poison had spread like smoke, quiet and choking. Io walked slower, her feet swelling, her back aching, but she never complained. She rubbed her belly, whispered songs to the child, and kept working. Sometimes she would sit under the tree in the back garden, away from eyes, and cry. Then she'd wipe her tears and rise again. Jabari, always traveling to trade goods in neighboring lands, only saw Io when he returned for short visits. She smiled for him, hid her pain. "I'm fine," she'd say. He believed her, kissed her forehead, and left again. He never saw the empty plate. He never saw how she slept on a mat while others had beds. Wanuka watched with cold eyes, waiting for Io to break, but Io didn't. Every day her belly grew, and with it, a quiet power. She carried not just a child, but hope, and deep inside her she knew this baby would change everything, not just for her, but for the whole Btorii bloodline. The sky roared that night, as if the heavens themselves sensed what was about to happen. Rain fell like daggers, and thunder cracked so loud it shook the windows of the Btorii house. Io sat quietly in her corner, her hands gently cradling her swollen belly. The baby stirred inside her, as if feeling the storm outside, and the one coming from within the house. Wanuka's footsteps were sharp. She burst into the room like a storm herself, eyes filled with fire, voice shaking with rage. "You think this child gives you power here?" she growled. "You think your dirt can root itself into my family's legacy?" Io stood, trembling, trying to speak, but Wanuka slapped the words from her mouth. "You want to bring your filth into this house? Not under my roof!" she screamed. Then, without warning, she grabbed Io's shawl, ripped it from the nail on the wall, and flung open the front doors. Rain slammed into the room like a wave. "Out!" Wanuka bellowed. Io gasped, begging, "Please, the baby!" But Wanuka had no mercy. She dragged the pregnant woman through the hallway like trash, threw open the gate, and kicked her into the mud. Io slipped, landing hard on her knees, her hands covering her belly. Cold water soaked her clothes. Wind howled. Lightning lit the sky. "Leave!" Wanuka screamed into the storm. "Die in the rain if you must. Your child will never see the light of Zumbala." Then the gate slammed shut, and silence followed, except for the rain. Io lay there for a moment, shivering, mud covering her legs, her face pale with shock. She reached for the iron gate, but it would not open. No servant came. No voice offered help. She was alone, completely alone, barefoot, without food, without shelter. Io stood slowly, her belly heavy, her feet sinking into the wet earth. She wrapped the shawl around herself, though it was already soaked. One step, then another. The road was dark, flooded, and cold, but she walked, through puddles, through thunder, through tears. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she had to go, far from the house that had hated her, far from the mother-in-law who wanted her unborn child dead. Each step hurt. Her body was weak, but her spirit, somehow, held firm. The child inside her kicked once, and she whispered, "I'm here, my child. I won't let anything happen to you." Villagers watched from windows but closed them quickly. None dared challenge Wanuka, and so Io walked on, invisible to the world, but burning with quiet fire. A girl turned woman, a wife turned exile, a mother turned warrior, and that night, under the stormy sky, in a world that had rejected her, Io made a silent promise. This child will live, this child will rise, and one day, the world will remember the woman they left in the rain. By morning, Io's strength was almost gone. Her legs wobbled with every step, her shawl clung to her body like wet bark, and her breath came in sharp gasps. But she saw it, just beyond the hills, the arched wooden gates of Zundari, a town known for its strange ways, where words danced like songs and coins had no value, only beads and trust. Her last bit of energy pushed her forward. She stumbled to the gate, leaned on it, and fell. The next thing she felt was warmth, not the sun, but a gentle hand brushing wet strands of hair from her face. A woman's voice, low and calm, hummed a lullaby she hadn't heard before. Ayo opened her eyes to find a face lined with age and sorrow, but filled with kindness. "My name is Narema," the woman said softly. "You're safe now." Narema was a spice seller, known in the Zundari market for her bold flavors and silent strength. A widow with no children, she lived above her shop, surrounded by jars of dried peppers, crushed herbs, and powders that painted the air. That day, she took Ayo into her home without question. She wrapped her in dry cloth, made her broth from okra and smoked fish, and stayed beside her until the fever passed. "You're stronger than you know," Narema whispered each night, placing a hand over Ayo's belly. "This child is not a curse, it's a crown." Ayo barely spoke at first. She was too broken, but slowly she healed, not just her body, but the wounds inside her. She learned how to measure turmeric without spilling, how to roll spices into tight paper bundles, how to smile without flinching. She lived in the tiny room above the shop, hidden from the world, her belly growing rounder every day. Zundari's people never asked questions. They traded stories for onions and salt, and if someone looked like they carried pain, they simply nodded and let them be. So Ayo was safe there. She worked beside Narema, waking before the sun to sweep the stall, mixing spice powders with skill. She learned to laugh again, slowly, as the baby kicked stronger and stronger. Narema became her protector and teacher. "Life has bruised me too," she once said, "but bruises fade. You will rise." Each night, Ayo looked out the window at the Zundari lanterns, her hands resting on her belly. She whispered prayers not to gods, but to the stars. She didn't know what the future held, but she was no longer just the girl who had been thrown out. She was becoming something more, something powerful, born not from revenge, but from survival. And deep inside her, the child kicked again, strong and sure, as if answering the call. The night was heavy with rain, when Ayo felt the first pain. Narema lit every oil lamp and boiled water with dried lavender and mint, filling the air with calm and warmth. In the small back room of the spice shop, with thunder echoing in the hills, Ayo gripped the edge of the wooden bed and cried out, not in fear, but in fierce determination. Her hands shook, her breath quickened, and as lightning lit the walls, a cry louder than the storm pierced the night. A boy, wrapped in soft cloth, with skin like polished bronze and eyes that stared wide and still. Eyes that didn't blink in confusion, but watched the world as if he had known it before. Ayo held him close, trembling with joy and awe. "Akon," she whispered, her voice cracked and full. "Strong one." Narema stood behind her, tears in her eyes. "You've given birth to more than a son," she said. "You've brought fire into this world." As days passed, Akon proved different from the other market children. He didn't cry without reason. He didn't fear darkness. He would sit quietly and watch people as if reading their thoughts. At only 2, he pointed out herbs Narema had misplaced. At 3, he calmed a wild dog that had chased others through the alley. He stood in front of it, stretched out his tiny hand, and the dog sat down like it had known him forever. At 4, he listened to old warriors telling tales in the market and began repeating the chant, perfectly, word for word. He asked about the stars, about gods, about why people hated, and why some hearts were so cruel. His questions made even the elders pause. Narema often sat beside Ayo in evenings and whispered, "This boy, he's meant for something far greater." But Ayo never told Ekon about Zumbala, or the house of Btorii, or the stormy night she was thrown out. She kept the past locked in her heart, afraid that one day the truth might shatter their peace. Still, she raised him not with bitterness, but with strength. She taught him how to carry love without letting pain weigh him down. She taught him to defend the weak, to speak when others were silent, and to hold his head high even when others whispered. In the quiet corners of the market, traders began to notice the boy. "He walks like a prince," some said. "There's something royal in his bones." Ayo would smile but say nothing. She didn't need the world to know yet. All that mattered was that her son, her miracle, was alive, safe, and growing stronger with each day. And Ekon, he felt it too, not in words, but in dreams. Dreams of drums, of battles, of crowns he'd never seen but somehow remembered. He didn't know where they came from, but he knew, deep in his soul, he was born for something more. By the time Ekon turned 12, his mind was sharper than any blade in the marketplace. He spent his free time watching elders play strategy games under the old neem tree, and soon he began winning against grown men, including the chief's own sons. They tried to laugh it off, but the sting of defeat never left their faces. Ekon didn't boast. He only bowed respectfully and walked away with quiet confidence. At 16, he was already a leader. Traders trusted him to guide their caravans through rough and dangerous lands. He never lost a single man or camel. Bandits feared his name. Merchants paid him extra just to ride in his shadow. And wherever he went, people whispered, "Who is this boy with eyes like fire and words like thunder?" Ayo only smiled whenever someone asked. "He is no one's son," she said softly, but her heart told a different story. She knew her son carried the blood of Btorii royalty. She had buried that truth deep, but fate was starting to dig it back up. At 20, Ekon stood tall and proud. His voice commanded respect. His decisions brought order. Men twice his age knelt before him, not because of fear, but because they trusted him. He could speak to children and chiefs alike, and both would listen. Even Narema, now old and resting more often said, "You lead without shouting. That is real power." One hot afternoon, chaos broke into Zundari. A group of fierce bandits stormed the market with swords and fire, shouting and stealing. People screamed and scattered, but Ekon didn't run. He stood in the center, eyes steady, arms firm. Without a shield or armor, he fought, not just with strength, but with brilliance. He used the narrow alleys to trap them, the crates of spices to blind them, the sounds of the market to confuse them. By the time the town guards arrived, Ekon had already tied up every bandit with ropes from the trading stalls. Not a single innocent life was lost. Word of his bravery spread like wildfire. It reached the ears of King Oromi, ruler of the mighty northern province. The king rode to Zundari himself. He sat on his grand horse, looked Ekon in the eye, and said, "You were not born for shadows. You were born to lead." He offered Ekon something rare, command over his royal warrior guards, a position given only to those born in noble blood. The crowd waited for Ekon's answer, but he didn't rush. Instead, he stood tall and made a quiet request. "I accept, my king," he said, "but before I wear your crest, I wish to visit a village, a place called Zumbala." The crowd fell silent. Ayo froze in the shadows. The name, unspoken for years, was now alive again, and in that moment, fate began to stir. Ekon was no longer just a warrior of Zundari. He was a storm heading back to where it all began. Ayo sat quietly beside her son as they approached the village gates of Zumbala. Time had touched her hair with silver, but her spirit still burned softly behind her eyes. She hadn't returned in years, not since that stormy night when she was cast out like trash. But now, the winds had changed. Ekon rode ahead on a tall black horse, dressed in warrior robes of the north, a golden sash across his chest. Trumpets blew, dust rose. People gathered along the roads, whispering and pointing. "Who is he?" villagers murmured. "Is he a prince? A chief?" No one recognized Ayo at first. The quiet girl who once cleaned their streets now carried herself with quiet dignity, dressed in fine but simple robes, her head held high. In the crowd, Wanuka stood frozen. She had come out of her hut to see what the noise was about. Her back was bent now, her lips twisted with bitterness. She leaned on a wooden stick, squinting at the strangers. But when her eyes landed on Ayo, her mouth dropped. "That woman!" she gasped, her voice cracking. "No, it can't be." Then she looked at the young man beside her, the one leading soldiers, the one who held himself like royalty. His face, his eyes, that strong Btorii jawline. It was like looking at a younger Jabari. Who is he?" she stuttered, fear creeping into her voice for the first time. From deep inside the house, Jabari had heard the noise too. Sick and weak, he dragged himself to the doorway. His body had failed him over the years, but his eyes still carried sorrow. He saw Ayo, the girl he once loved, the woman he failed to protect. "Ayo," he whispered, his voice trembling. Ayo nodded, her eyes wet but proud. Then Ekon stepped forward. He stood tall in front of everyone. His voice rang out across the village. "I am Ekon," he declared, "son of Jabari and Ayo, the child you threw into the storm, the child you said would never see the light of Zumbala. I return not as a beggar, not as a shame, but as a king." Gasps filled the air, hands covered mouths, eyes widened, tears flowed, women dropped to their knees, children stared in awe, men bowed their heads. The same villagers who once looked down on Ayo, now clapped, cheered, and reached out to touch her garment. Jabari broke down in tears. He tried to speak, but emotion crushed his words. Wanuka stumbled back, pale and trembling. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. She was staring not at a boy, but at the truth. The very child she had cursed was now a legend returned. Ekon helped his mother off the horse gently and held her hand as they walked through the same village that once turned its back on her. But this time, heads bowed in respect. Trumpets played again, louder. Zumbala had witnessed the return of the forgotten queen and the rise of the sun she tried to erase. A few days after Ekon's triumphant return to Zumbala, the weight of guilt finally crushed Jabari. He had spent years in silence, haunted by the memory of Ayo's tears, the stormy night, and the child he never held. When he died, his last words were barely a whisper, Ayo's name. The village mourned him, but no one could deny that regret was what truly ended his life. The village council, seeing Ayo's dignity, offered her the title of head matron, a position of great honor. But Ayo gently refused. "I didn't return for power," she said. "I returned for truth." Her voice was calm, her heart at peace. Ekon, however, was different. The people had seen his strength, his wisdom, his leadership. The vote was quick and clear, unanimous. Ekon was made the new chief of Zumbala. He stood proud, not as a prince born in riches, but as a man forged in struggle, shaped by pain, and guided by honor. Wanuka's fate, however, was a sharp contrast. The council stripped her of all her honors. They took away her rights, her servants, her voice in village matters. No one wanted to be seen near her. The same woman who once walked proudly with her chin high now wandered with bent shoulders and hollow eyes. She was cast out of her home, forced to live near the palace gates. With torn clothes and shaking hands, she sat in the dust, begging for scraps. People passed her by without a glance. Children avoided her. She was no longer feared or respected. She was forgotten. And every morning she saw Ayo, dressed in silks, glowing with quiet beauty. Ayo walked past her. Villagers greeted her with bows. Children ran to hug her. Women admired her strength. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't boast. She didn't seek revenge. One day, as Wanuka stretched her hand toward her, hoping for a coin, Ayo paused. Their eyes met. Wanuka's lips trembled. She expected insults. She expected payback. But instead, Ayo simply looked at her and said in a soft, steady voice, "The womb you tried to silence birthed a legacy you'll never destroy." She said no more. She walked on, surrounded by honor, love, and the people who once turned their backs on her. Ekon walked beside her, tall and strong, a living reminder that destiny cannot be stopped by hatred. Now, every day, Wanuka watches the palace from the dust, the same place she threw Ayo into years ago, and that is how karma works. Quiet, sharp, inevitable. Never look down on someone because of where they start. You might be looking down on the next king. If this story touched your heart, if it made you pause, cry, or feel something deep inside, then remember this. Life is full of storms, betrayals, and broken roads, but those who walk with courage and kindness will always rise in the end. Ayo was once thrown into the cold night, pregnant and alone, but she never gave up. And her son, Ekon, born in pain, rose with power. This is not just a story. It's a reminder that your beginning does not define your ending. How many people around us are silently suffering like Ayo? How many have been cast out, forgotten, or mocked, yet carry greatness within them? This story is for every broken heart, every lonely soul, every dreamer who has been told, "You are nothing." Share this video with someone who needs hope. Let it be a light in their dark moment. Let it remind them that even if the world turns against them, destiny still whispers their name. Like this video if you believe in second chances, in karma, in justice. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that inspire, heal, and awaken the soul. And above all, thank you for watching. Your time, your support, and your heart mean everything to us. Stay kind, stay strong, and never look down on anyone, because the next person you judge might be the future king.